The Canby Report was produced and recorded on the traditional territories of the Coquitlam, Mississaugas of the Credit, Anishinaabeg, Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples.
It's February 26, 2025, and there are 38 days left until the April 5th Vancouver by-elections, and 598 days left until the Vancouver general elections. This is the Canby Report, and I'm Matthew Naylor.
And I'm Hume Bushfield. Been a hell of a few weeks.
Yeah, we put off recording last week for basically confusion, and that, as it turns out, was a mistake.
There had already been a lot to talk about, and then the last week has just been like the wheels coming off the city.
As the city careens downward, we must remind you that if you appreciate citizen journalism in the city of Vancouver, please support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Canby Report.
Yes, patreon.com/Canby Report. Get access to the Slack channel. Slack is not working at this exact moment, but presumably it will be fixed soon. I had a good meetup with one patron the other night, and I will be in Victoria having a Patreon meetup next month, so get in there for the details.
We mentioned the wheels coming off, but this is actually a wheeled issue. Vancouver Mayor Ken Sim, apparently the DUI allegation against him is baseless. So, to fill people in, a rather explosive accusation has been circulating for a number of years now against Mayor Ken Sim that he was stopped by Vancouver police in January of 2023 for driving under the influence. This all comes from the political commentator and a social media post from Alex Sikumas, who said that the police stopped Ken Sim on West 4th Avenue, but that Ken Sim was kind of waved through.
Yeah, I had also come across someone called Katie Lewis who had tweeted in August and September of last year that she had 17 off-the-record sources confirming this. These tweets are still up. Alex, his tweets aren't up anymore, but I think he just turned his Twitter off. He has not retracted his tweets explicitly. He's told Global News, I stand behind what I've said. People seem to have this rumor around, but the big thing isn't Ken Sim driving drunk, allegedly. It's that the cops seem to have just covered it up and made it went away. Because it's BC. We've had premiers and other prominent politicians caught with DUIs. He probably could have survived it, although times are changing, thankfully.
Yeah,
but
I mean, don't drink and drive, but if you do, and if you're in the province of Ontario, please feel free to call Naylor Law Office. There is also the added controversy that this led somewhat indirectly to the firing of Ken Sim's former chief of staff, Kareem Alam.
He tells Global News that he heard about the allegation from a staff member in the mayor's office on Wednesday in January 2023. At the time, he was in the hospital recovering from surgery. And he calls back from his hospital bed saying, we need to get to the bottom of the facts. If they are true, I won't be flacking for this mayor, and he'll likely have to resign. Goes back to work on Monday and gets fired. Alam says, I wasn't given any reason for my dismissal, but I can't imagine it would have been performance-based.
Someone had to resign, apparently, but it wasn't the mayor. This resulted in a investigation by the OPCC, the Office of Police Complaints Commissioner. Abbotsford Police Chief Colin Watson reviewed the findings and basically said that there was nothing here. It's a big nothing burger.
Yeah, all they were able to find was that Ken Sim's plates had been run by officers at about that time, but it seems like they didn't get any more statements or had any evidence that there was anything more to it than that. The report itself, though, has been seen by Global News, but not otherwise released. Ken Sim has said, we should release the report, and the OPCC says that's not how our reports work.
My favorite quote about this is, Mr. Sikumas irresponsibly used X to spread a rumor communicated to him by Mr. Alam. This, to my knowledge, is the primary use of X. So I don't really know that it's a necessarily irresponsible use of X so much as its intended purpose. But, get off social media, delete your account. It's terrible.
I mean, if the rumor is baseless, as the findings of this seem to suggest, then that rumor is defamatory to post, either whether you're Mr. Sakarmis, who has not retracted it, or the other Twitter user I mentioned. But we have not yet seen the mayor avail himself of tort law. Maybe he just doesn't believe in suing people from defamation, and he's a real free speech absolutist. I don't know. I can't know his mind.
No, who can truly know what is in the mind of another? It is certainly a way, if the mayor indeed wants the, quote, truth to be made public. The public deserves to know the full truth, is what Mayor Sim tweeted on X. But this is apparently not as important as not dragging the matter through the courts, where people have to testify under oath.
Listen, Matthew, the VPD didn't cover up my DUI shirt is raising a lot of questions already answered by the shirt.
The mayor and the police continue to work hand in hand in other matters. In particular, a $5 million task force barrage has been announced to tackle crime and public safety concerns. There is a recent press conference in which Mayor Sim and Vancouver Police Department Chief Adam Palmer unveiled a plan. They've described it as, quote, a new long-term initiative targeting organized crime and public safety concerns.
Yeah, this follows a string of announcements that the mayor and ABC are trying to shape up the by-election around public safety and revitalizing, in their term, the downtown east side, going hard on basically we got elected in 2022 to do these kind of things. Now we just need to finish the job.
Yeah, to be clear, it's not a barrage of task forces. There aren't multiple task forces. It's a thing called Task Force Barrage, which really does make it sound like there should be multiple ones, but it is in fact just one. It worked for them last time. It worked for them in the election. They managed to fearmonger their way into a win, and certainly Kennedy Stewart was useful to them on the assist. Crime is down. There are conflicting statements on this. The overall crime rate is down about 3% since 2018 as of September of last year. However, the violent crime rate has risen somewhat since 2018, apparently.
It's the challenge of small numbers, right? Yeah. There aren't a lot of violent crimes in the city. It is a largely safe city. And 2020, with the pandemic and the lockdowns, kind of threw a wrench into everything. More recently, as we've seen increases in inflation and tougher affordability, that also plays a big role in how much crime is happening because people struggle. For the cops' point of view, they are arguing that, quote, decriminalization policies limited our ability to conduct drug investigations in the downtown east side. That's a lie. That can't be true because they simply couldn't arrest people for possession. They could have still gone after organized crime.
Arguably, it could have made it easier if they were just like, where did you get this? We're not going to arrest you. Just tell us where you got this.
It seems like Task Force Barrage is really going to focus on harassing poor drug users and unhoused people again, as they've wanted to. Amid all of this, we also got the news that Chief Adam Palmer is retiring.
Yes. So after 4 decades with the Vancouver Police Department, the leader of that organization is going to be stepping down. We're going to have a new police chief, and that is going to be a interesting process. You know, I mentioned it's going to be heavily guided by the police union. We'll see why in just a moment, but I actually don't know who appoints the police chief.
The police board, which is chaired by Ken Sim, they're hoping to fill it by the end of the year. Senior Deputy Chief Steve Ray is most likely to act as interim chief until a replacement is appointed. Now, what's interesting here is Palmer's retiring 5 months before his contract was set to expire. And when it was first announced, it was like, oh, is he going to run for ABC? But he's retiring at the end of April, so it wouldn't have quite worked time-wise there. The question I'm wondering is he going to run for the federal Conservatives in the upcoming election? The Conservatives have nominated all but 2 candidates in Metro Vancouver, Kingsway and Vancouver East, the most orange ridings in the country. But they could ask a mid-range candidate to step down and put Adam Palmer, former Vancouver police chief, as their federal candidate.
Yes, speaking of candidates, ABC Vancouver, the ruling party currently, though it seems to be falling apart at the seams, they have introduced a by-election candidate. Specifically, Ralph Kaisers, who is a sergeant with the Vancouver Police Department, and Jamie Stein, who is a leader in the tech industry and longtime community and business advocate, whatever that means, will be running in the April 5th by-election for the 2 vacant city councillor positions which were left open when Christine Boyle and Adrian Carr resigned.
Kaisers is the head of the Vancouver Police Union and has been quite controversial in that position, both by being active on Twitter and generally speaking out against everything he dislikes. He once famously retweeted a banner that had changed a sign in the downtown east side to say, "Fuck the DTES grifters." Jamie Stein's the other end of the right-wing umbrella. He comes from being the potential candidate for BC United in Vancouver-Langara and was not picked up by the BC Conservatives, but he has found a home now to fulfill his political ambitions with ABC rather than the provincial scene.
Yeah, so this is exactly what ABC is. It's an alliance of Vancouver's business community and the police, and 'twas ever thus. I'm not surprised by these nominations. This is kind of exactly what they expect to be.
It's very funny to me, though, for Kaisers to basically agree to take a pay cut by jumping from his probably pretty well compensated position in the VPD to council, and in some ways to take a leadership cut from going from the guy who endorsed Ken Sim and could probably whisper what they should be doing to the guy who will have to take marching orders from Ken Sim.
Yeah, unless we end up with a Chicago-esque alderman running the city council, but here's hoping that they lose. They should lose. Don't vote for them. In the meantime, further endorsements have come out. In particular, the Vancouver District Labour Council has selected the candidates who are going to be receiving their support during the April 5th by-elections. They did this at the February 18th regular meeting, and they have endorsed Lucy Maloney for One City and Annette Riley for the Greens.
Yeah, this is interesting because there are 3 candidates out there. Sean Orr is also running for COPE. And COPE has a long history of being connected to the VDLC, being involved in labor, and was kind of, I think, hoping for this nomination, possibly over the Greens. And I think COPE wasn't invited to the meeting, if I heard the rumors right. I kind of get from the VDLC position of like, a One City and a Green were in place, let's just endorse the replacements. And the Greens have brand strength, even if they may not have the organizing strength on volunteers and donors. So this is a more moderate, safer pick. Sean Orr can be an inflammatory guy on Twitter.
Yeah.
I kind of get it, but I also get the frustration on the COPE side of being cut out of this endorsement. I'm also very curious to see if this matters at all. I think the VDLC does not have the strength it once did in churning out votes for the people they endorse.
No, they are the vehicle through which cooperation should be happening because it is the most established and they do have people. There are substantial indicators, particularly from the last election, that their machine just doesn't work. Maybe that's because Kennedy Stewart was co-opting a fair amount of it, and he managed to split any kind of organizing strength into a kind of atomized mess, which left him kind of a pile of wet oatmeal at the end of the campaign. But something's got to shift if they want to achieve results.
So with that, we basically have our by-election candidates selected. I saw Jerry Maguire, not the character played by
it's
Tom
not
Cruise,
a
number of
fictional
years.
Tom Cruise.
Yeah. It's a kind of perennial. Also ran, has filed papers with the city, and I'm sure we'll get some other independents throwing their hats in there. But all the main parties have nominated, and we'll try and get more into what they're all running on in the coming weeks, presuming council doesn't keep going chaotic.
Speaking of independence, Rebecca Bligh, Vancouver councillor, elected under the ABC banner, formerly under the NPA banner, having departed the NPA over their anti-Sochi policies. She and ABC have also parted ways. This, apparently, is not a resignation so much as her being kicked out of caucus. Specifically on social media, she indicated that she had been ejected from the party.
She got a call on Valentine's Day that she described as a pretty one-way conversation to say, you are not, quote, a core value fit.
Now, what are those core values? What core values does Rebecca Bligh hold that would make her such a bad fit for ABC? From everything I understand about this dispute, that value appears to be compassion. The fucking horrendous plan that ABC has brought forward to basically pause, i.e. stop building social housing, was very acrimonious, and Rebecca Bligh did not support the position that her party was taking, leading to that party saying, you are not part of our party anymore. The plan, as bad as it was apparently worse.
Yes, a draft memo from October 30th was given to the Globe and Mail, and Francis Beulah reports on it with big red confidential marks on every page. This was a plan to, quote, reinvigorate the downtown east side. That included a lot of different steps, including the no net new supportive housing. This preliminary version included, quote, the reunification roundtable with First Nations, Métis, and other Indigenous groups that would help return some members to their local nations, reunification being a meaningful step toward reconciliation.
That's code for putting people on a bus and shipping them out of the city.
Matthew, it says those nations were open to it.
Okay.
Sure.
Right. Open to is not enthusiastically embraced. Let's not mince words here. Them saying, we're not going to fight you in the courts over this is not the same as enthusiastic consent.
So that policy draft drew pretty widespread criticism. Nevertheless, the official version, the slightly toned down version that came to council this past week, did still maintain that no net new supportive housing and envisioned a effort to uplift the downtown east side, replacing, this is very valuable actually, with the dilapidated SRO units with new modern buildings. That needs to be done regardless of your ideology here. Like, there are unlivable houses there that some of our most poor and marginalized people are in. But more broadly, this is a push to try to get the rest of the region to build social housing and to break up the concentration of social support services that are into the downtown east side, to share the burden, in the mayor's view, across the region, something that won't work.
No, it won't. This has been a kind of organically developed place that did emerge after the 1920, I believe, 3 destruction of Japantown and the subsequent destruction of Hogan's Alley to build the freeway. Not totally organic, but in the wake of disruption comes distress. Since those 2 destructive events, the area has been a hotspot for people who find themselves with no other place to go.
And so concentrating social services there is organic and makes sense, right? It's kind of like how if you go to some retail districts, you find, like on West 4th, all the outdoor shops are in the same area because it's convenient to go to the same things in the same area. People who need social supports need lots of different ones, and having lots of different ones around helps those people. It feeds off and creates a cycle, but it's a self-reinforcing one that can help people a lot. And breaking that apart is going to increase trauma, in the words of Guy Felicella and others, and just generally make people's lives worse, and naturally attracts the criticism that this is a plan to gentrify the downtown east side.
Yeah, which will not work. It just won't. Many of the people who are down there are just going to remain there, whether there's support or not. If you create a situation in which the supports are taken away, that's not going to remove the people, that's just going to make their lives worse, and the problem worse, which is the most frustrating thing about this, which is that a policy is going to have exactly the opposite effect of the intent that it is trying to achieve. It doesn't seem like they've thought this through, and it doesn't seem like they've talked to people who understand this stuff, both of which I think are probably true.
The plan had its detractors, most prominently Pete Fry, obviously, as the sole opposition member, well, now also Rebecca Bligh as an independent. But notably, Lisa Dominato did vote against this update from staff when it came to council. It's unclear how long her core value fit will remain with ABC at this rate. It seems like we're speed running the NPA's 2018 to 2022 existence, where Rebecca Bligh goes, and then as do the rest.
Yep. I mean, Rebecca Bligh, we don't agree with her on everything. Ian and I don't agree on everything with each other, but she has proven herself to be a conscientious counselor, a good advocate for the causes that she believes in, and a woman of principle. And that, apparently, is not a core value fit for ABC, which, I mean, could have told you that, Rebecca, but, you know, welcome to the resistance.
So it does seem like a lot of the plans for the Downtown East Side were done in ABC caucus meetings, and we now have a report from the Integrity Commissioner, specifically the Park Board Integrity Commissioner, but it happens to be the same person as Council's Integrity Commissioner, Lisa Southern. And she has said... Who is
not an airplane.
She has said ABC's meetings at the mayor's house and in retreats to caucus prior to Park Board meetings violate the open meeting concept that is enshrined in the Vancouver Charter and the Park Board's legislation. It breaches the policy, and they shouldn't have done that.
No, they shouldn't have. I do, to an extent, I understand, and we have certainly advocated a certain amount of horse trading, particularly in city council, where the meetings are interminable and the length of the meetings was threatening the democratic process itself with too much democracy. But the problem at Park Board is that that wasn't happening there, and there is, a conspiracy, I guess we're going to call it, to get rid of the Park Board, highly directed by Ken Sim, and people are just going along with it.
Yeah, we have this tension in local governance where it wasn't imagined they'd have political parties when they were first created in law. And the idea was we were going to have chambers of debate. Everyone comes, discusses, and passes it in the open meeting. You should arrive willing to hear the best arguments and move forward the best ideas. In 2025, where political parties exist, and the political realities are in tension with the legislative requirements, and they have violated the legislative requirements. Meeting in caucus, especially if your caucus at that point was above quorum, was a majority of the board, meant you're basically just deciding what you're going to do in secret. You can come to the board, just pass a motion with no debate, and you've undermined the ability of people to know how decisions are being made. And so I think this is the right finding from the Integrity Commissioner. I think the challenge is we might need structural changes to our local governance to accommodate this, or maybe we just abolish political parties and go back to chaos at the board.
Yeah, which, honestly, I don't think is a great idea, but, and certainly it has downsides in places where there aren't political parties, Toronto or Calgary, for example, because people run together. The parties exist, and it removes a very valuable piece of information from the electorate in making their decision. It's a valuable heuristic, and I don't think that trying to abolish that is going to be a super helpful way to bring positive change to the city.
Once again, the integrity commissioner has no actual power beyond issuing a damning report, which she's done. It's now up to the park board to decide whether they should censure their own members, the majority of whom are named as violating the open meeting requirement.
Woof.
Only Tom Digby is not named, because even though the 3 ABC members left caucus, they were at these closed meetings during that time. In this investigation, triggered by Pete Fry, he complained about this moment where the integrity commissioner was about to get neutered by the city. This was one of the 2 complaints he filed to prevent ABC from doing it because suddenly they were all in conflict. The 3 ex-ABC park board commissioners cooperated fully and spoke to Southern, and the ABC 3 commissioners all lawyered up and had their lawyers talk to the integrity commissioner, which is their right, but it is notably different.
In other news, Surrey has decided to withdraw from the Metro Vancouver Regional Growth Strategy. Mayor Brenda Locke has announced that Surrey City Council wants to remove its municipal jurisdiction from Metro 2050 Regional Growth Strategy, which is the plan established by the Metro Vancouver Regional District.
Surrexit.
Yep.
This was a motion passed at Surrey Council, brought forth by Councillor Pardeep Kuner. It was unanimously endorsed by Council. It doesn't actually tell me much about why they disagree with this plan. Notably, Surrey didn't, as far as I remember, object to the plan when it was being developed by Metro. Surrey had strong representation there as the second biggest municipality in the region. They went along with everything. Now the plan is out, has actually been in place for a little bit. Surrey's just like, no, we're cranky at Metro, and there's a lot to be cranky at Metro for. In this case, they don't feel like they should have to pay as much for sewage and water infrastructure if it's the North Shore's projects that are going to hell.
That is a reasonable gripe. That project is a giant fucking boondoggle. But everyone needs water, and we've all got to share the burdens because not every project can be everywhere. That's not how buildings work.
So there's now a push by Surrey to create a South Fraser planning group to do their own thing. I like to imagine that Surrey doesn't like the regional growth strategy because it predicted Vancouver would remain the largest municipality, and they're just griping about that. If that's the reason, and Surrey triples its growth to build more houses and becomes the largest municipality in the region, good for them in that case. But this feels like a lot of petty grievances translated into the most bizarre angle.
Yeah, and very specifically, they're saying this puts too much of a burden on Surrey while not giving concomitant benefits to Surrey residents in the plan. What those benefits would be, they have not articulated particularly well. They've just decided to say, we're taking this ball, which we cannot take, and going home with it, which they cannot do. This is the master plan. It is the master plan.
Chaos reigns. Like, Metrovan's not had a string of good headlines, right? We've talked about some of the scandals, the North Shore treatment plant being the biggest of them. Most recently, the council has tried to rein in spending, and they've started a bunch of meetings to figure out where the waste is happening. At a recent 4-hour meeting, they managed to go through a bunch of line items and stop a total of $300,000 in a grant that the city was going to give to the Fraser Basin Council, which was then transferred to notable impoverished organizations, IKEA and The Brick.
There are no words, only Kallax bookshelves. It's kind of embarrassing. I think they should be embarrassed. None of these people are capable of shame, really. We learned that during the massive and nonsensical dispute over policing. Are they just looking for windmills to go charging at? I don't understand.
I think this grant was worth closer scrutiny, specifically the grant for the Fraser Basin Council to help purchase zero-emission delivery vehicles. That's how it got to big companies that could have probably just bought their own delivery vehicles. Spending 4 hours to save $300,000 in regional governance doesn't seem like a good use of anyone's time either. I'm not happy about any part of this story, Matthew. It's just frustrating. Meanwhile, Global News continues its vendetta to destroy Metro Vancouver.
Yes. Finally, very sadly, the Burnaby Now, New Westminster Record, and Tri-City News are going to close. For over 40 years, the New West Record has served that community. These are all part of Glacier Media. That company has attempted to maintain operations, but ongoing challenges in the industry have made it unsustainable to continue. This is sad for the journalists, for democracy. It is sad for the readers and people for whom this is their way to connect with their community, and it sucks. Our heart goes out to everyone who is going to be affected by these closures, and our local news landscape, which is going to be incredibly impoverished. These organizations, in particular the Burnaby Now, we've drawn a lot from. We don't do a ton of reporting.
Firsthand, yeah.
Yeah. We talk about things that actual journalists go out and are able to put their time and their organization's money into researching. The reason that we feel comfortable talking about them and referencing these stories is because we trust the journalistic integrity of these types of organizations. It's just really sad to see organizations like these having to shutter themselves, and it will have a negative impact on the region.
Yeah, they've been struggling for a number of years. These three papers stopped their local print distribution a couple years ago, so the writing was kind of on the wall. They've employed fantastic journalists that we've talked to on this podcast, Dustin Godfrey and others, and we've drawn a lot from their reporting. I live in the Tri-Cities, and so I've followed the Tri-City News, and their reporters have been overstretched, and the quality suffers from that. Even when they have the best reporters, you can only do so good when you have to pump out 2-3 stories a day. I've been on the other side pushing press releases and see those get churned out by Glacier, Black Press as well, not often with the most work done into them that I think those stories even deserve. So it's been a frustrating era to watch news media decline. Thankfully, there are still other publications in each of these. The Burnaby Beacon and Tri-Cities Dispatch are newsletters that are still doing good work. And I believe there's a New West one as well. Councils are underserved. We just had a by-election for school board in Coquitlam where 1,100 people voted out of 100,000 eligible voters. The winning candidate got 640 votes.
Oof.
And it's like, no one knew what was going on or what the issues were. We need better coverage of our municipal councils. It's frustrating that they claim they explored all possible options, but like, did they consider selling the papers to their workers or just giving them? If they're losing that much money, they're not worth anything. Like, I feel like there was options here and they chose to close them. So damn Glacier Media on this one.
Well, that brings us to an end of yet another episode of the Canby Report. We end every episode with a little tidbit from Vancouver's history, a Vancouverata, if you will, and this week we thought we would bring you the story of one of Vancouver's original newspapers, the Vancouver Daily World.
Given we're talking about newspapers at the end, my other thought was to try to go back to police political corruption, but there's way too many stories.
Oh, man.
The Vancouver Daily World was founded in 1888 by John McLaglen, who was the editor of the paper. When he died in 1901, his widow, Sarah Ann McLaglen, became the first woman publisher of a daily newspaper in Canada.
I think it's McLagan.
She was also managing editor, editorial writer, proofreader, and occasional reporter. So it's not just today that reporters often have to do all the jobs. Notably, in 1905, L.D. Taylor bought the paper with other interested parties. He would go on to be mayor of Vancouver and use the Daily World as his mouthpiece to spout his random political ideas. It helped him land in the mayor's seat a record number of times, not consecutively.
The most notable thing that the Vancouver Daily World has bequeathed unto the city is perhaps the old Daily World headquarters. The World Building, now known as Sun Tower, was completed in 1912. It was the tallest building in the British Empire at the time of completion, which, great, good for it. I mean, we've had that a couple of times, weirdly. I'm pretty sure the Marine Building also was once the tallest building in the British Empire. But after a number of years of financial difficulty in 1924, the Vancouver Sun bought and subsumed the Vancouver World. Thank you very much for listening to another episode of the Cambie Report. For Leg and Boot Media, I'm Matthew Naylor.
I'm Ian Bushfield.
Good night. It's February 6, 2025.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
This is a Ron Burgundy moment.